I'm Nir, founder of Palo Alto Networks, and what I want to do is talk about zero trust. Like, what is zero trust? What is the zero trust enterprise? Why this is the right time to do that? So let's start. Zero trust is something I hear from all customers. Everybody wants zero trust. Everybody has a zero trust project. It's very important. It's so important that even the president of the United States is talking about having a zero trust architecture in the US government, but nobody really says what is zero trust and how to think about it. There's a lot of uncertainties around zero trust. So I want to put some perspective around it and maybe explain what zero trust is. So to understand what zero trust is, let's start with trust, the concept of trust. If you think about it, almost everything we do in cybersecurity is about trust, right? 25 years ago, 27 years ago, when I started in the cybersecurity industry, before it was called cybersecurity, you couldn't trust connections going into your organization, out of your organization. So let's put a firewall. The firewall is going to help us to decide whether to trust the connection or not, based on IP addresses and port numbers. Then we said, well, what about the user? I want to know who the user of the connection is. No problem. If you remember 25 years ago, the RSA secure ID cards, two-factor authentication, they help us decide whether to trust a user or not. Then, can I trust the content? Well, the firewall allowed it. Can I trust the packets? Can I trust the content? No problem. Let's create a new industry, IDS, then IPS, to look at the content. Can I trust the URLs? No problem. URL filtering. Can I trust files on the endpoint? Antivirus. What about files I've never seen before? Sandboxing. What about all the IoTs I have around me in my enterprise? IoT security. So really, every time we had a new challenge in cybersecurity, it was about, can we trust something or not trust something? And the solution was always, let's create a new way to decide whether to trust it or not. And that, of course, led to the whack-a-mole architecture of cybersecurity, where every time we just try to whack the next mole, but it's never ending. And we are in a continuous cycle of finding new things we cannot trust and then trusting them, and finding new things we cannot trust and then creating technology to trust them. And that also led to an interesting situation where we trust different things differently depending on the circumstances. We call it implicit trust. So as an example, if you have an employee sitting in an office trying to access a data center that's local or at least physical data center that's under your control, probably you would assume, well, the employee has already presented their badge, they're in the office, they are on a computer issued by the enterprise. I have 802.1x to make sure that they are connected to the network correctly. I'm just going to have a firewall between the employee and the data center, and that's how I'm going to decide whether to trust or not. In another use case where the employee is sitting, for example, in a coffee shop and trying to access applications running, let's say, in public cloud, it's a completely different story, right? Then you're going to run them through very, very strict checks, two-factor authentication, a CASB, a proxy, a firewall, everything to make sure that the employee is whom they say they are, and that their endpoint is secure, and that the connection is secure, the transaction is secure. You're going to run very different security in that use case. So a lot of implied trust in the way we've built the cybersecurity infrastructure over the last many, many years. The idea behind zero trust is to change that. The idea behind zero trust is to remove all implied trust. And no matter what the situation is, even if it's a user sitting in a physical location accessing a data center that is next door to them, we are going to run all the checks all the time as we would in the most strict use case. That approach actually leads to a much simpler infrastructure, because all of the sudden, we don't need to buy different equipment or different solutions, different technology for securing users depending on the situation, or securing applications based on the situation, and so on. We can use one architecture, one system, one solution, one technology to secure all users all the time, wherever they are, whatever it is they're trying to do, because we're going to run them through the same security checks. And the same is true for securing applications and so on. And that's the idea behind the zero trust enterprise. Now, this is a good time to talk about zero trust. Why? Because many organizations are going through major transformations of their cybersecurity infrastructure for different reasons. We're seeing many organizations re-architecting their wide area networks, their internet security because of a hybrid workforce. We're seeing many organizations re-architecting their data center security. Why? Because of the move to the cloud. And we're seeing many organizations re-architecting their security operations centers. Why? Very hard to find people, higher volume of attack, much more sophisticated attack, the need for automation. So this is the right time for zero trust. We understand what zero trust is. And now the question is, how do we build this zero trust enterprise? How do we take an enterprise that today has 50 different solutions from 50 different vendors, we're doing different things in different use cases, and make it a zero trust enterprise? So to do that, we need to understand that zero trust applies to three major areas. There is zero trust for users trying to access applications. There is zero trust for applications trying to access applications, right? When two components of an application talk to each other or two applications talk to each other. And there is also zero trust for infrastructure. We need to find a way to trust our traditional infrastructure like routers and switches and computers and so on, but also IoTs and other new things that we have in our infrastructure. We need to find a way to trust our supply chain, right? If you think about the SolarWinds attack, it was maybe a standard computer that was running SolarWinds, but the software itself made really that computer an appliance, made it like an IoT. We need to find a way to trust the different components of the infrastructure. So zero trust for users, zero trust for applications, and then zero trust for infrastructure. And if we go through each one of them and look at how you do that, we'll see something very, very interesting. So zero trust for users. What do we need to secure? We need to secure the identity of the user, right? We need to know who the user is, and we need to do that in a very, very secure way, two-factor authentication, whatever you think is the right way. Then we need to secure the workstation that the user is using, whether it's a computer or a phone or a tablet. Then we need to secure the access between the user and our infrastructure. And finally, we need to secure the transaction itself. Once the user gains access, we have to make sure that the transaction is secure, that nothing is trying to hijack that connection, that access that was approved, and then do an invalid transaction. So we have to continuously monitor the transaction itself. That's the idea behind zero trust for users. No matter what the situation is, I'm going to identify users the same way. No matter what the situation is, I'm going to secure the workstation the same way. No matter what the situation is, I'm going to secure the access in the same way. Remember, even if it's a user sitting right next to the physical data center, and no matter what the situation is, I'm going to secure the transaction in the same way without assuming anything about what I can trust. Zero trust for applications is very, very similar. We have to trust the identity of the application somehow. We have to identify the application and make sure that when two applications or two components of an application talk to each other, it's actually the right components or the right applications. We have to trust the workloads, whether it's a physical machine, a VM, a container, and so on. We have to trust the access, the actual access between two applications or two components of the same application. And we have to trust the transaction itself. We have to look into what the two applications are doing when they talk to each other and then make sure that it's the right thing running there. Very similar to zero trust for users. Again, no matter what the situation is, no matter whether it's running in a physical data center, SaaS, public cloud, whether the two components are in the same data center, whether the two components that talk to each other are in different data centers around the world and so on, one physical, one public, or two, it doesn't matter what the situation is, I'm going to assume nothing, and I'm going to run the full suite of tests or checks or cybersecurity checks and policies that I would do in the most extreme case. And guess what? Zero trust for infrastructure is also very, very similar. We have to trust the identity of the users that are accessing the IoTs for whatever reason. We have to trust the IoT itself, the hardware and the software. We have to trust the access that we have into those IoTs. And we have to trust all the transactions that we see between users and IoTs. And sometimes IoTs will talk to each other and so on. So very, very similar to zero trust for users and zero trust for applications. If we put all of that into a matrix, it's going to look something like this. You see that we have to trust the identity, the workload or the IoT or the workstation. We have to trust the access, and we have to trust the transaction in all cases. Now, here's the interesting thing. When you talk to most vendors in the industry about zero trust, they'll tell you, oh, we are zero trust. Now, if you want zero trust to be real, you really have to do everything that you see here in all those boxes. We need to find a way to do all those things really in a much simpler way. And that's what we're doing at Palo Alto Networks. We have our network security platform, which you can see here in yellow, covering big part of zero trust for users and zero trust for infrastructure. We have our Cortex XDR, which is our endpoint security solution for both user endpoints and workloads. And then we have Prisma Cloud for covering all the data center, all types of data center physical cloud for zero trust for applications, while the identity and access management part of it, the identity part of it is done by your favorite third party. So with Palo Alto Networks, there is a very easy way of getting a zero trust enterprise. Use our 3 platforms. They cover all the different use cases. Again, the other option is 20 different solutions from 20 different vendors trying to integrate everything together. And the interesting thing is that for some of the use cases, you'll need a network security vendor anyways, like Palo Alto Networks. Why? Why use specific vendors for specific use cases inside the zero trust enterprise when you can use one? That's what zero trust is about. And good luck with becoming a zero trust enterprise. Thank you.